Since I got all the parts in that I was waiting for, I thought I'd get started on this, show you a couple of things. What I've got here is the capacitor I'm going to use, and it's the same value as the one that came off. It's a different color, but it's the same value. It's 0.047 microfarads, and I'm not going to get into what all that means, but I'm just saying, or sorry, like I said earlier, I'm just trying to kind of mimic what was there before. If I don't like it, I'll change it later, but I have no reference for a P90 pickup in my mind because I've never owned a guitar with a P90. So I'm going to try and keep it as similar to the original as I can, which means I'm going to use the same value of capacitor. I'm using the same value potentiometers. I got the 500K potentiometers. I got them on my little 2x4 here with my mini Vise I showed in an earlier video. And all I've done is I've just lightly taped them to the 2x4. And I'm going to do a little bit of the soldering and the wiring while the pots are into this board here. It just makes it a little easier to do some of the wiring. I'm just going to show you this capacitor. And you can see this little black piece on here. All that is a little piece of heat shrink. And if you don't know what heat shrink is, they come in these different sizes. You can get like a big kit with various sizes in it. And they just look like little plastic tubes. And you heat them up and they shrink. And the reason I'm doing this is to help prevent these leads from shorting out against something. Now, you don't have to do this. Like, you don't have to go out and buy all this stuff. I have it. I like to use it when I rewire stuff because when you put everything back into the cavity after, you never know, something you've put on may be touching or grounding out against something and causing some buzzing or a short circuit or whatever. We'll start with this one. I'm just heating up that solder I just put on there. I'm going to slide my wire through. Let it cool, hold it while it cools. And that's that. And I'll do the same for the other one here. I'm going to have to move it again because I can't quite see what I'm doing. Okay, I've got the camera repositioned to get a better look at this. So you can see there's the one solder joint there, and the other one's up here. Oops. Sorry about that. So we've got the tails sticking out here still. I'll just lift that one up so you can see it. Same with this one. Now you obviously want to cut these off. You don't want those long tails sticking out when you're done. I'm just going to leave them for right now because I do need to do a little more soldering specifically on this lug here. I'm going to be soldering in one of the pickup wires that are no, not the pickup wires. Sorry, one of the wires is going to the switch. So when I get the switch out, I'll just going to do the same thing. I'm going to slide that in there, heat up the solder, put it in there, and put a little some more solder on if need be. I just wanted to show you this little process first. I'm not sure how much of it I'll be able to capture on film because of the just because of the camera angles and stuff, but I'll try and show you as much as I can. So for now, I'm just going to leave those little tails on there. I'll snip them off later. And so that's the process for soldering. I obviously have some more to do here. I'll film it all, and maybe I'll just kind of cut it up in the edit because I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up covering up some of it with my hands as I go through the process, but I'll try and keep as much in as I can to show you as much as possible. Okay, so I'm going to solder this capacitor to the tone pot now. So I've already tinned up the lug. Now let's make sure I can see everything here. So it's the same process as the wire. I'm going to heat up that tinned area and slide this tail through. Okay, so I've got the one end in there now. And I also put some heat shrink on the other wire on the other side of the capacitor for the same reason. I just don't want it to touch anything. What I'm doing now is I'm just going to peel this tape back, and I'm going to be grounding the other side of this capacitor to the back of the potentiometer, just like right there. And I'm just going to solder it directly on there. But I found the surface is really shiny and smooth, so it's best to maybe take some sandpaper and just kind of scuff the area up a little bit It just makes it easier to solder to. And you don't need a very big spot, just enough to get your wire in there. Fine. Just to take some of the shininess off, and can feels a little rough to the touch, so that's probably fine. Yeah. Okay. Now, this next part is where you want a pretty solid soldering iron, one that's got an adjustable temperature on it. So, because when you put your soldering iron to the back of this pot, this metal is going to absorb a lot of the heat, and you don't want to leave it on there too long. So you want to get it as hot as you can, and on there as for the least amount of time as you can in order to get the solder and stuff on there. So ideally, what you want to do, let's move this out of the way. Take your soldering iron and place it over the area we just sanded. Warm it up. Get your solder and just melt a little pool, little puddle onto that area. Just like that. Now, I like to let it sit for a second just to let everything cool down, because, yeah, even just touching that now, that's pretty hot, and that thing was hardly on there. So just be careful when you're doing this stuff on the back of the pot. You could cook the inside of that if you leave it on there too long. So best to go for a high temperature setting, short amount of time. If your soldering iron doesn't have a variable temperature gauge on it, again, you're just going to have to be careful with it, because it'll take a while, because that metal is going to have to get pretty hot in order for that solder to actually melt again. So now I'm just going to take this lead, kind of get it into position here. Something like that. You might want to get a little tool, something like this. It's just like a metal stick that you can hold things in place, because again, it's going to get pretty hot. Just going to get this, bend this down a bit. Yeah, that should be good. I'm just going to put a little solder on the end of my soldering iron. So I'm going to hold this piece down with my stick, place the soldering iron over top. It's going to take a second for it to heat up enough to melt that solder that's on there. Okay, I can see it starting to melt off now. There we go. Just hold it while it cools. There we go. Yeah, that's pretty hot. We should be fine though. I mean, they're not super brittle. They're meant to take a little bit of heat like that, but yeah, no, it's on there nice. And what you're looking for is you want to see a nice shiny solder spot. If it looks dull, like if it looks like my tool here that I'm using to point, that could indicate you have what they call a cold solder joint, which on the surface looks like everything is attached and connected. But if you were to maybe jiggle the wire or bang it, it might just pop loose, because it's what they call a cold solder joint. It's not making a good connection. So you want to just make sure that all your points where you've soldered have a nice shininess to them. That's a good way to tell. And obviously you just want to give them a little wiggle and make sure like they're all pretty solid. My microphone died during the section of this recording, so I'm just doing a quick voiceover explaining what I've done here. All I did was get a new piece of wire. I tinned the end of the wire, and then I soldered it to the volume control pot. I'm not going to show the whole thing because the video is quite long at this point, so I'm just going to cut that out, but you'll see the finished product later on in the video. Before I start to reinstall the electronics, I mentioned before the screws that hold in the P90 pickup. One of them was a little warped, and also the threads on it were, not the threads, I'm sorry, the head on the Phillips screw was almost rounded right off. I don't think I'm going to be able to get that back on, so I just ordered some replacement screws, so they're coming. But until they get here, um, what I thought I'd do is I'm going to plug these holes where the pickup screws mount into the body. There's two of them. The reason I'm doing that is because the screws that are coming are just a few millimeters shorter than the ones that are currently in there. So my concern is we get it all back together and I go to mount the pickup and the screw doesn't have enough material in the wood to grab in order to adjust the height of the pickup, right? Because that's how we make our height adjustment with those screws. So my thinking is I'll just plug these holes with some toothpicks, glue them in, snip them flush. Like, you're never going to see this until you take the pickup off anyway, so it doesn't matter. But what it's going to do is give us a nice fresh area to screw in the new screws, and that way we won't risk the chance of maybe these holes getting widened out too much, or just not enough screw coming through and sitting in this hole and it's not going to grab properly. I don't know for sure if it'll happen, but I did some measuring and it's pretty close. It's a little sketchy. I think I'd rather just do this and be safe, and that way we're covered. So it'll be similar to the way we filled the other the pick guard screw hole in previous video with just a little wood glue and a toothpick. So I'll just quickly do that now while I've got the camera running here. I'm just going to take a little glue on the end of my toothpick. It's not going to focus. That's a really snug fit. It's almost a perfect size. And then I'll do the same for the other one. This toothpick was cut already from the previous repair we did, filling that hole. That's why it's a bit shorter. And that's it. I'm just going to let those dry up. I'll snip them flush, and then we'll be able to put the new screws into that same location without any worry of them not grabbing the wood underneath. So I'm just going to clean up that glue, and then we'll start wiring in the pickups. Okay, we're getting ready to put the rest of the components back into the body. I did a couple of small things outside of the recording. Just added a couple of wires here, but we still got a lot more soldering and stuff to do. So I'll film as much of that as I can. One thing I noticed when I was like, I just wired the bridge plate through here. I just got the wire through the body. Normally there's a ground that would come and attach to the plate here at some point. Usually it's just a wire. As you can see, I've got one here. I'll zoom you in for a better look in a second. And that just grounds to the bottom of the plate here. And once it's on the body, like you would never see it. But I can't remember taking a ground wire off when I removed those components. Now, it could be my memory is just no good and I just forgot. I'd have to go back and look at the video. But regardless, I decided I was going to run a ground wire in just to play it safe. And that being said, this bridge being painted black, I had to sand away a little section of it here. I did it over here, then I decided to move it here instead, just to remove the paint, because this pickup, as you can see, let me zoom you in a little closer here. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got a red wire and a white wire connecting to the pickup. And then we've got a ground wire which connects to this brass plate here. I'm not sure if I can get the angle right, but that's where it's soldered to, this plate, the ground. So at first impressions, I thought, well, there was no ground wire because these screws, these three screws, which hold the pickup in place here and are used for adjusting it, okay, these ones here on the other side, they're connected to this black plate. So this brass plate is, the screws are threaded through there connecting to the plate. But because this plate is painted black, I'm thinking there's no connectivity as far as carrying the ground through. So I sanded off a little bit here, as you can see, expose the metal underneath. And then when I screw this thing back into place, you'll see over here, right there, I'll zoom you in better in a second. I just got a little ground wire sitting there, so when the plate connects, it'll touch this exposed little piece of metal, and it should ground the plate. Now, I don't know if that's really necessary. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I thought it's probably not going to hurt anything. Because this thing is painted black, again, I don't know if it's really going to come into play or not, but I don't know. It's no big deal. It's easy enough to remove if it's causing an issue, and if it isn't, well, it's not hurting anything. So just thought I'd show you that before we start reassembling everything. And over here, the other day, I showed you, just move the camera here. I put those toothpicks in the P90 hole. These guys here. I'm still waiting on those screws, so they're not, I'm not sure. They should be coming in a few days, but until they get here, we'll just have to be patient. But it's just 2 screws. I can solder the wire and place it in there. We can keep moving forward with the project. The only thing you need to do now is to snip these little toothpick ends off. I cut a little bit of the tails off just so they weren't in my way. So these have been sitting for a little over almost 2 days now. So they're nice and solid. They're ready to be snipped. If you have a pair of flush cuts, these type of cutters, they're quite handy for doing this type of stuff. Getting in there, getting in as flush as you can, giving those a little snip. Like that. You might have to sand that just a little bit. You know what? I think we're probably okay. These things are good for getting in these really tight spots. Yeah, no, I think that's fine. That should be good, because we're just going to be putting our new screws in here anyway. This will all be covered up, right, with the pickup when it's back in place, so it'll be fine. And again, I don't know if that was 100% necessary, but it's not going to hurt anything to do this. And we're just going to maybe drill a small little tiny pilot hole, just so when we do put the screw in, we have a nice little starting spot for it to bite into the toothpick wood. But we'll look at that when we get the screws in. So for now, let me just move some stuff out of the way here. Okay, I'll just back us out a little bit. So I did most of this wiring in the previous section of the video. The only other thing I added was the output wire for the output jack here, which I soldered to the pot. And I added some ground wires here for the pickups. I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute when I start explaining what I'm doing here. See all these green wires here? These are my grounds. And I just use green because it's probably easier to see on the video against the black guitar. And yellow for basically the hot wire, so to speak. And so what we've got to do now is connect up the pickups to the switch. We got to wire in the output jack, all of which we'll need to do at this stage of the build, where we got to do this type of work with the components, hanging outside the guitar. We can't go any further with soldering and assembling things outside of the guitar. So this is the time to be careful with what you're doing. Get your rags out to protect everything. And yeah, well, let's just get started. So what I'm doing here is, let me zoom in a little bit. You see this little bundle of wire here twisted up. What this is a ground point. Now, I like to do this. I know some other guys I've seen online do something, quite similar to this. All this is doing is taking the ground points from the rear of the potentiometers, okay, and I'm moving it just to here. And I'm going to solder this, and then I'm going to put a piece of heat shrink over top to protect it. Now, what you'll see in most schematics or other, if you pull your guitar apart, you'll probably see this connection. Everything's soldered to the back of the potentiometers. Anyway, it's pretty common. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but I like to try and keep these things clean. As you can see, we just got a couple little blobs of solder there to ground things. And this is a little easier when you're working on the guitar and you got to take stuff out. I find it's easier to have this tail here, because let's just say, for example, you wanted to swap out a pickup. All you got to do is snip these wires off here from the ground, and obviously the lead, the hot lead, for the signal. But if you wanted to do that, and the wires were soldered on the back of the potentiometers, you could snip that wire off. You still have that big blob, and now you got to reattach your wire to the same big blob of solder, and you're more than likely going to add to that blob of solder. And every time you heat up that much solder on the back of a pot, you kind of risk damaging it, which is another good reason to have a adjustable soldering iron, so you can get the thing nice and hot and minimize the amount of contact you're having to the back of the pots. I kind of touched on that in the previous video. So that's what this little bundle of wires are for. They're just basically grounds, and we are going to connect everything up using this as kind of like a main ground point for all our grounds. So I'll kind of go through it as I make the connections and solder everything into place. Okay, so I've got my ground points all soldered up here. This one here. So these are all the grounds throughout, like the pickups are grounded here. That wire I ran over to the bridge plate is here. And the connection, this green wire here, is grounding to the pot on the control plate. Now, because this control plate is also painted black, I wanted to make sure I was getting connectivity, because normally when you screw your potentiometers and your switches and stuff in, there's your ground for your pots are right through the plate. They're all connected together here. Sometimes you'll see there'll be jumpers from like this pot to this pot and then to the ground onto the switch. That's not really necessary in this case, because I've already checked it with my meter. We've got connectivity between the pots and the grounds, and it's all occurring through the plate itself. Now, I guess what had happened was, when I had drilled out these holes, I showed in an earlier video, to accommodate these new potentiometers, I exposed the metal, like I took away the paint, exposed the metal, and now the potentiometers are making contact with the metal, creating a path for the ground to go all the way through. So that's why there's no jumpers anywhere here for grounds. What else we got here? The only other thing I did was this blue wire here. I just put a little piece of heat shrink right there to connect this white wire. And this is the connection for the neck pickup, the P90. And as you can see, this wire is really, really short. So I wanted to keep all the grounds together. So I connected the ground for the pickup to the little bundle I've got here. And then I just added a little extension piece of this blue wire so I can reach the switch to make the connection from the pickup to the switch, which I'll show you in a minute. This is the bridge pickup here. This wire was already long enough. I didn't see any reason to make an extension on it. If I'm having trouble getting it in, or if it's a little too short, I'll do the same thing, but I think we'll be okay here. And then we've just got the output jack here, which will be one of the last connections we make. So I'm going to wire up the switch now, and I'll try and show you that, but again, I'm not sure how well this will work with the camera angles. Because these wires are, this is a little shorter, I'm going to do this blue one first. And as you can see, let me just zoom you out here. Because I've got, I made these little extensions here, I've got enough room to lift the plate right out of the body and hang it off to the side of the guitar. So if I ever got to come back and do work on this thing, it makes my life a lot easier, or even the next guy for that matter, because there's a fair bit of room in this cavity to accommodate a little bit of extra wire. There's no reason to keep them super short like that. It's just makes your life easier. So that being said, I'm going to connect up this blue wire. Okay, so I've got the blue wire looped through one of the pins here, just to kind of hold it in place while I show you what I'm doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solder over top, and it'll bridge those two pins and make the connection right through here. I just got to watch. I got the camera kind of close to where my workspace is, so it's going to be a little careful with the soldering iron. I did order a new tripod today, so that should be coming next week. So hopefully that'll eliminate this camera angle issue I'm having. So there, I put a little blob on the first pin here, and that's looks good. And I'm going to do the same to the second pin on this side here. Okay, I'm going to solder in the output jack. And I've already tinned the wires here on the output jack wire. I've also tinned the lugs on the output jack. I'm going to put the ground on first and try not to block everything with my hands. I'm going to just heat up the solder I tinned on the pot on the lug. Slide that through, let it cool. And then I'll do the same for the signal wire. I'm going to snip a little bit of this off. I don't need this long. Okay. That's the output jack. Let me just take it off so you can get a better look. And I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, this is a replacement jack. This is a pure tone in the box or the case. This is what I'm using. And this output jack has got 4 tabs. See that? So when your guitar cable plugs in there, it's got 4 points of connection, and it really holds it nice and tight. And they're very, very strong. Whereas the standard ones that normally come on guitars just got this one prong here, and it sort of holds the cable in as it goes through. I can show you. Let me just grab a cable. Like that. So your signal leads would be up here on this connection here, and then your ground would be on the barrel on this long piece here. And that's what would be inside the interior of this output jack, that tube inside there. That will be where your ground is. Now this one, let's see if I can show you. There we go. So you can see how it connects, 2 for the signal lead and 2 for the ground on the barrel. Yeah, so it's quite strong. It's never going to just fall out. So, I mean, well worth the investment in my eyes. So I did not film some of the other soldering because of the old camera angle problem I'm having. That being said, I did order a new tripod, and it's meant to be put on a desk, so hopefully that'll eliminate this issue. But I will show you what I did. I just, well, I guess I can leave you, this is Zoom. I've already showed you the pot wiring. Move over to the switch here. The blue wire is where we've got our neck pickup, and this white wire here on the end is our neck pickup. And these 2 tabs are soldered together on both ends with the blue wire and the white wire. And then in the middle, they're bridged as well, and that yellow wire heads over back to the pot here. Now this wiring is similar to what was done on the original wiring, and also some other suggestions I got online, just seeing how other people have wired up a guitar like this with a P90. One other thing to show you is this ground point here. I mentioned this earlier. All I did was solder it together and put a little piece of heat shrink on just to protect it from touching anything. So all my grounds are here, and that's basically it for soldering. Next time I do something like this, I'll have better camera work. Like this is a great angle, but when I start getting in there with my soldering iron and stuff, I'm just blocking everything with my hands. So I need something that can go, directly down. But hopefully that new tripod will fix that. So it'll be an issue for next time. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my multimeter and make sure I've got good grounds. That I can show you. Let me just change the camera. Okay, so I've got my multimeter here. This is just a little cheap one. You don't need to spend a ton of money on these things, but they're pretty reasonably priced if you want to pick one up. Unfortunately, this one doesn't have a buzzer feature, which is pretty invaluable if you're checking for continuity, which is what I'm going to show you now. So it won't make any noise, but what you can do is you can watch the display here. And what we're looking to see is basically a zero resistance. We want to look for a dead short. And what I'm going to be doing is checking my ground points that I've already soldered and connected up throughout the guitar. So what I've done is I've taken one of the leads here, the black lead, put an alligator clip on it, and then clipped it to the ground point on the potentiometer here. You see that right there? That way I can keep this free and just leave it off to the side, and I can move my other lead around and just keep an eye on this display here. So you'll see it go to zero each time. And just turn you a little bit this way. So I'm just going to be checking for different points of contact along the way. So first point of contact I'm going to check is the back of the tone pot. So I touch it with my lead, and you can see the meter goes to zero. Move that out of the light. Okay, so we've got a connection between this pot and this pot. Now I'm going to move over to the switch and check the housing of the switch. Zero. So we know we've got a connection there. And that connection is happening with that control plate that I mentioned earlier in the video. So now I'm going to move over to the bridge pickup. And now these three screws here, I'll show you. You can see they're connected to this brass plate underneath. And that's the height and adjustments for the pickup. Now, I can touch those screws because they're connected to the brass plate, which is grounded. Okay, so I can touch any of these screws and we'll get our connection, our continuity check to zero. Okay. Now, I'm not 100% sure if we really need that bridge ground that I put in there. Yeah, see, I'm getting a nice ground there, and this thing isn't even touching anything. I'm thinking we don't need that ground after what I'm seeing here. Anyway, and the last point, our second last point, would be the neck pickup, which is slightly out of frame. See if I can bring it in here. Okay, and again, we've got our brass plate at the bottom of the pickup, and there's our ground connection there. We've got a tiny little bit there. No, it's zero. We're good. So I know my grounds are good. The last one I want to check is our output jack. And we've got our ground wire there. And we've got zero there. So all the ground points on the guitar are good. They're secure. If I lift this bridge plate off, so this ground wire I mentioned earlier is not coming into play now on the bridge. Like I can touch it with my my meter, and I've got a good ground there. But if I touch the screws on the plate of the pickup, Yeah, I'm getting continuity there. So I'm thinking we don't need this ground wire in here. Now it's easy enough to take out. We just got to pull it through the hole and then snip it off our little bundle here. Again, it's another good reason to have something like this ground point here. Makes things a little easier. So, you know what? I'm going to take that out. It's obviously not needed. So I'm going to remove it, and I can add it back in later if need be. So I'm not going to unsolder this connection. I'm just going to snip the tail as close as I can. There we go. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We've confirmed our grounds are all good. All the soldering is done now. And now it's just a matter of putting everything back together. But before I do that, I'm going to check the electronics and plug the guitar into an amp and listen to see and make sure everything is wired correctly. Make sure I wired up the switch properly, and maybe we've got it backwards or something. Just a quick update. I apparently did wire the switch backwards, so I thought I'd just show you. The white wire here and the blue wire here, I had them reversed, effectively making the switch operate backwards. So I just switched the wires around, just desoldered them, and then just resoldered them to the correct spot. So I just thought I'd show you that's the only thing that was wrong. Everything else checked out good. At this point in the project, I really can't go any further until I get the screws for the P90 pickup. And sometimes what I'll do when I have like an excess amount of wire in the cavity here is I'll take a small cable tie, like one of these, and just put a little tie around a bundle of wires, not tightly, just enough to hold, the excess amount in place. I don't really think we're going to need it here because the wires that I added, like the blue and the yellow and the green, they're all a good length. They're not too overly long and they're not too short. I can still lift the control plate and all the stuff on it out of the body without having the wire being too short where I've got issues trying to say I got to resolder something, for example. So I think I'm just going to leave it in this case. But just a tip for future jobs, it's you can get a little bag of these at your hardware store, and they're pretty handy to have. And no one's going to see it; it'll all be tucked inside the cavity here. So, but it's up to you if you want to do that. But for right now, that's about as far as we can go. So I guess that'll wrap it up for this section. Thanks again for watching.